US President Donald Trump has announced a trade deal with Japan that he said will result in Japan investing $550 billion into the United States.
When Donald Trump announced the $550 billion deal with Japan, it looked like his plan had finally worked. After months of tariffs, threats, and tense negotiations, here it was, the grand prize. For a moment, it looked like everything had gone exactly according to plan. But then, the celebration stopped. Because just weeks later, Japan, America's most loyal ally in Asia, did the unthinkable. They walked away. The deal that was meant to prove US dominance suddenly turned against it. It became a warning that Asia was no longer willing to play by Washington's rules. So what went wrong, and how did Trump's biggest win turn into his biggest humiliation? Let's break it all down. The announcement. 23rd July, 2025. The sun shone brightly over the White House lawn as American flags waved gently in the warm summer air. Inside the press room, President Trump stood surrounded by automakers, energy executives, and his economic dream team. He was about to announce something big, and everyone could feel it. Was he planning new tariffs? Or was it going to be a massive deal with another country? The room fell silent. Then, with a confident smile, Trump spoke the words that echoed like a victory march. $550 billion. That was the number. Trump claimed it would be the biggest deal in history. Japan had agreed to invest in the US economy. Trump called it proof that his tariffs had worked, that America could strong-arm its allies into paying up. Under the agreement, Japanese exports would face tariffs of just 15%, a sharp drop from the previous 27.5%. In return, Japan's investors would pour hundreds of billions into US industries. According to Bloomberg, Trump bragged that America would pocket 90% of the profits. Trump's aides proudly called it the deal of the century, and for a moment it looked perfect. Trump had done the unthinkable. But as Trump made his announcement, negotiators in both governments understood one thing. The deal felt more of a handshake than a treaty. Still, Trump was thrilled. He looked straight into the camera and declared, "We rebuilt the deal. We rebuilt the power." But what he didn't know was that halfway across the world, Tokyo was already cracking under pressure. And what happened next would change everything. The backlash. In Japan. In Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party, anger was brewing. Headlines blared across newspapers, "Capitulation" and "Surrender to Washington." Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba had hoped the deal would ease tensions with the US. But instead, it set his entire government on fire. After months of tariff threats from Trump, Ishiba had agreed to the deal under pressure. But as the details emerged and Japan's media revealed how much control Washington held over the funds, the backlash was immediate. Within weeks, protests erupted across Tokyo and Osaka. Opposition leaders condemned it as economic surrender. By September, Ishiba's approval rating had collapsed below 20%. And then, the unthinkable happened. Ishiba resigned. Japan suddenly found itself scrambling for a new leader. On October 4, 2025, they chose Sanae Takaichi, Japan's first female prime minister. A protege of the late Shinzo Abe, she was conservative, hawkish, and fiercely protective of Japan's sovereignty. In her first address to the nation, she declared, "Any deal that undermines Japan's sovereignty will be reviewed." Those few words sent shockwaves through Washington. Behind closed doors, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and Treasury officials panicked that Tokyo might never send a single dollar to US agencies. But Tokyo wasn't backing down. The era of quiet compliance was over. Japan was ready to take matters into its own hands. Japan's defiance. On October 1, 2025, Japan's chief negotiator, Ryo Akazawa, announced that Japan would not allow Washington to control its pledged funds. Instead, Tokyo would manage them through its own institution, the Japan Bank for International Cooperation. For the first time in decades, Japan had said no to America. The implications of this were immediate. U.S. defense contractor stocks fell nearly 6%. Wall Street analysts called it a quiet revolt. Tokyo's finance ministry flatly refused to transfer even a single dollar until Washington changed its terms. Japan will control the pace, volume, and destination of all disbursements, Akazawa warned. Inside the White House, panic spread. The mood shifted from celebration to disbelief. Trump's aides were stunned. The president's biggest deal was collapsing before their eyes. Treasury officials warned that if Japan didn't reverse course, other allies might follow. But soon, the White House realized this wasn't just Japan saying no. It was Asia sending a message to the U.S. that this was enough. For the first time in decades, one of America's strongest allies was openly defying Washington. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about sovereignty, about respect, and about who truly called the shots in Asia. The domino effect. The shockwaves didn't stop in Tokyo. They began spreading across Asia. South Korea was the first to blink. Just days after Japan's announcement, Seoul declared it would re-evaluate its own $350 billion framework with Washington. Their national security advisor told Reuters bluntly, "We are not obligated to pay in cash." That single sentence echoed across the Pacific. It was a direct message to Washington, and it was explosive. South Korea had signed a similar deal with Trump's team, promising tariff relief in exchange for investment. But after watching Japan stand firm, Seoul refused to send any upfront payments. Suddenly, Asia's two most important U.S. allies were walking away from Trump's grand plan. Malaysia, Vietnam, and Indonesia also quietly began reviewing their agreements. The Financial Times called it the beginning of a regional reset. America's strategy, built on tariffs and pressure, was collapsing under its own weight. From Seoul to Jakarta, officials began asking the same uneasy question: was Washington still a partner or a bully? Behind closed doors, U.S. diplomats pleaded for calm, but every leaked memo said the same thing: confidence in America was slipping. By the end of October, one thing was undeniable: the balance of power in Asia was shifting. Washington's counterattacks. Donald Trump didn't take rejection quietly. Back in Washington, he went live during a cabinet meeting, visibly furious. "We made the best deal ever," he snapped, "and Japan's already walking away." For Trump, this wasn't just a diplomatic setback. It was personal humiliation. Within days, the White House unveiled a counter-move: the U.S. Investment Accelerator, a new initiative that would allow Washington to strategically manage allied capital. In other words, control it. But there was a catch. Foreign governments would have just 45 days to consult, and no voting power whatsoever. For Tokyo, that was unacceptable. Akazawa fired back, reminding reporters that Japan's contribution falls within the range where there will be no foreign exchange impact. It was a subtle but sharp warning. Tokyo alone would decide when, or if, the money would move. The standoff had now turned personal. So what do you think? Is America losing its status as the world's undisputed superpower? And does Trump's deal of the century mark the beginning of a new era? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Also, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming stories. Until then, see ya.